where were we? Okay, so we were looking at the item we added on the array, and I mean we can look in all of them, but yeah, all the way on that side. The number is exactly the same, so it works. So again, we don't need this anymore. We can just nuke it out of existence. Yeah, this is still for the individual TV show. Okay, now I need to remove this one, or I'll just rename this one to a prettier variable name. So now in here, this number gives us the total of time, of years spent watching all the TV shows that we have there. And this number gives us the total in years of time spent watching each individual TV show. Now, we said we would not gonna do this, but let's just give another one just to make things differently. Yes?
May I know which part would you put the 80 years as a base or the average tax format?
Yeah, well, I mean, until now we haven't calculated any percentage. Right now, this number is just the total in years. Like this is in years. This is just a conversion of all this into years, because and again, when you read the exercise, as I've been saying, it is okay to look at this part as like this is going to be hard to figure out how to calculate this or how to calculate that. So honestly, always choose the simple path. Like we have it in years right now. Like if now we cannot do the calculation to a percentage of in 80 years lifespan, again that's already what we have is already very good. We have the total in years. Like we already had to go through a for loop again, objects, arrays, all the stuff we've learned until now.
So it is assumed that the answer is for a year. How it took the entire time for a year based on a year, not for the 50 years.
No, this is how much years. So, for instance, in total was 0.02 years. It's no percentages yet. This is just summing up all the minutes, hours, days into a year. Like, of course, we don't get even close to half. But by this, we can see how much percentage it is of 1 year, right? By looking at this number, kind of. It's kind of 2% of 1 year. So of 80 years, again, that's something we can do now. Now we have all the data to calculate the percentage. Because now we have, this is how many years we've spent watching TV. So in a lifespan of 80 years, now we kind of have the data to calculate that. So now here I added just another TV show just to see what happens. So yeah, now the total, I don't remember how much it was before. I think it was 25. Yeah, I think it was 25 or something like that. So, and we added 1 more day, 10 more hours, and 4 more minutes, because I added the new one here. And now, if we expand, now we have Breaking Bad as well in time in years. So now we have one thing. Now we have how many years I spent watching everything and each one of them. And now we want to calculate the percentage for each of those values. And by saying that, it means that I want to call something, right? That I can give a year and give me how much percentage it is of 80, right? So by that, can be a function. Probably should be a function. Otherwise, we will have to do it here, right? Because this one is for each of them. And then we will have to do it here, because this one is for the total of it. And again, we can do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Or we can try and write a function that, giving in years, it gives me percentage of it. And yes, that part might be a bit fuzzy. How do we calculate that? But let's not worry with that. Let's just create a function that calculates percentage. Is it this way you write percentage? Might be. And as we said already, we give years to this function, right? So we can just say years, right? And then this returns probably, I don't know, right now let's just write it 10%, right? It won't return 10%, but now just so that we have something to work on. And in here we have total in years. So now, again, one of the big reasons why functions are quite good. I mean, if we were not using a function, we could just have a variable with the, let's say, let average life equals 80, right? And then we could calculate based on that variable, whatever. And we will need it anyway, because we need to calculate based on this variable. But by having a function, we can just give values to it, and then it returns something, right? So let's just console log this function. I'll do it all the way down here. Calculate percentage. And now let's give it 1 year only. Of course, this is probably going to give us 10% because we are returning 10%. So now,
so Marco,
yeah.
But I believe the number you found there, 0,03 some 228 something. This is the number for 1 year.
Yeah.
Because you said in years, and the
Yes.
name you gave is in years. But when you divide it by 365, it gives you for 1 year.
Yeah, but then we are summing it.
So that's why it's the percentage is a 10% because it's almost 0.03, which is 10% of 1 year, which is almost 10% of 365.
Yeah, but for instance, so if, and that's something we can also do. Let's say Game of Thrones was a really big TV show. So we can assume that that's 1 year, more than a year already. This even adds more and more. And we actually get 1.02. So this actually means that that's 1 year and something, right? So if now we have 365 here, now we have 2 years. And that's the reason why I'm creating this function that we give in years and then gives us a percentage of whatever
so you said
80 will be.
Because there are three different
it can
series
be,
and you are just adding the
yes,
time together.
We are adding all the time. So even though it looks like this is when it was 0.00 something, it looks like, oh, that's like a very small percentage of a year. No, that's how many years we spend watching, which it never reached 1. But again, because we can change any of the input. That's not actually, it's asked on the question to change the input, and it's always actually good to give an input like this because we know exactly what we're going to get back, right? At least not exactly, but close to it. And that's one of the reasons why now, for instance, if we have this calculates the percentage, right? And we know that the average life is 80. I will move this one inside here. So now, if I give 80, right, to it, which means that I spent 80 years watching TV and I have a lifespan of 80, according to the question here, the total should be 100%, right? So again, we can give as much input as we want to our functions, to our mostly the functions, because those are the ones that ask input. And sometimes, again, we need to be a bit tricky on asking ourselves, like, what's the result I know exactly, right? If I give 0, should be 0. If I give 80, should be 100. If I give 40, should be 50, right? And that's very easy because we know that right now we have this this weird number that we don't know what this means. So let's not worry with the number itself, because this is not to achieve the calculation of it, but to achieve the formula to calculate. So, I mean, usually, at least when I was in school, I would say that if x is to 100, right? And this is in the whole percentage.
You should divide with 100 to get the percentage.
Yeah, and then should divide whatever you give. No, if 1 is to 100, then x is to 80, right? So it's 80.
80 divided by 100.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's the percentage of 80. So in here we have our years, right? I will, come on. Let's just move it inside here. Okay. So in here we assume not 70, 80 is the average lifespan, right? So now whatever we're gonna get here, we're gonna say we have a result, const result, come on, result, it's gonna be years times 100 divided by 80, right? This and yes, we should need to put this parenthesis here, right? I mean, it doesn't make a difference anyway. And this should give us something. And let's return the result. Okay, instead of 80 here, I'll use this. So if we want to change the variable, we can change it here. So now, as I talked, we know specific things, right? So we know 80 should be 100%. We know that 40 should be 50%, and 0 should be 0%. Even if it's not 100% correct, I already have 3 things that tells me it's very correct. So let's just assume it is correct, right? So now, but of course we want to use the nice percentage thing. We won't do it here, sorry. We will do it somewhere else. So now we have a function here that calculates the percentage of it. But because we have a very, very weird number, which one of them is now? Is it the second one? Yeah. So I don't know, let's make it a bit more, let's remove a lot of them, right? That would make it a bit nicer, at least on all the examples we saw. There was like there was not a very, very, very long number. So that, of course, we can just search for it. Move decimal places, that would be, yeah, this could be it. No, we only want to remove some of them. Round to decimal, yeah. Yeah, we can use this. Is there anyone else? Yeah, to fixed too. This should do it as well. Again, this is the way that usually works in every single programming language or whatever. If you multiply by 100, divide by 100, rounding the first part of it should give you always 2 decimal ones. But this one should also work. So if we do this, I guess it should work, but let's give it, I don't know, a bit more. Yeah, okay. So maybe 3. Yeah. Again, this is one of those cases that if you don't know how to, it's actually not being asked at all. If you would use like the very big one, that would be completely fine. But it's one of those things that, again, you will have to search or at least text on the group chat. That would be also an easy way to, like, I need this, how do I do it, or where should I look at? Because again, when you go to the internet, you find 100 solutions and they're all correct. No one is wrong. And yeah. So now we have this one. Now what we need is to also, in here we have the percentage of total. So in here we can already do this part of the exercise. Yeah, there is a lot of code here, so let's just output equals this, and we will console log the output. And now in here, instead of console logging this, const total. So in here now, I'm assigning it to the constant so that then I can just send it here. And we know how to do that, right? Total plus, and this should give us in total is 0.36%. But now we also want to do it for each one of them, right? To say Game of Thrones this, Sopranos that, The Wire that, whatever is there. But we already have this array we worked on before that has the time in years. And we already have a function that calculates the percentage based on years. So let's just use that. So here, TV shows, we already have the years, as we know. So we just said calculate. Oh, come on, percentage in years. Now if you refresh, we have way different numbers, and okay, so yeah, it's okay. So in here we can say total now, because now it's not in years anymore, so that our the properties of our object actually means what we want. And now of course we have this for loop, this array, and we want to print it nicely, so let's use a for loop, right? And now how do we want the name and percentage of my life? Okay, so something like this. Now we can remove this one here, name plus took, and now const percentage equals TV show time dot, I would call it total. It's a bad naming actually, but we can probably live with it. And now I don't know if we have more console logs somewhere, but even if we do, it's not a problem. Undefined. It's title, exactly. Title and title, just so that it does match, and I'll just remove a couple of console logs here. Which one else? There is something here. TV show time. Okay. So this gives the result that we wanted. I mean, not the exact result. Again, don't look at the exact numbers. Those sometimes are very wrong. Like in here, you can see that the sum up of all this does not give that. So it's a little bit wrong, just a little bit. And again, don't spend a lot of time seeing that the number is not exactly. And I think it's okay to say this. If the number is not exactly what you think it should be, even that. At this stage, what we really want to train is, can I print out this? Can I move this piece of data to a different array? Can I go through it and maybe sum up? And again, if we don't know how to remove the decimals, that's completely fine. It's not the big issue. And again, the part of this exercise especially, we didn't told you to make a function that giving a date, giving minutes, hours, and days, calculates years. We didn't say that. But you also don't have to do this. You can repeat the code, because you have to do this somehow. Right or wrong, but something like this has to be done. But extracting to a function, that's a thing that takes practice, and that's one of the reasons I keep saying, if you repeat the homework, maybe at some point you can just look at it, and from the beginning you actually start writing. You don't even write anything else. You actually, from the beginning, you know, oh, I need to calculate the percentage, so this is how I calculate the percentage. This is done, even though that's the end of the exercise for us right now. Also, as Rasmus mentioned, that he took the approach, and I think Ricardo also took the approach of, instead of moving everything to years, you move everything to minutes. You know, because in here we try to calculate everything in years and then make the percentage, whatever. But you can also do the other way around. You can just, like we have, days and hours and minutes. So let's have everything in minutes, and then at the end, let's try to calculate years, because then we have a huge number with minutes, and that, again, it's numbers. It doesn't matter if it's one way or the other, as long as the process is there. But again, the most important part of these exercises, most important, of course, is looping through an array. Inside of the array, there is objects, and we are asking for the property of those objects, and we can work on them. In the beginning, we had, actually we still do, have, here is for one part of the exercise, here is for another part of the exercise, even though we have the same for loop. And understanding that this is possible, that we can do all these things, and getting rid of code to make functions, that comes with time. And if you try to focus that in the beginning, it's going to be way harder to try to figure out the solutions like that. But yeah, that's basically how one approach could be. Okay, I'll remove this one from here. Is there any questions about this one specifically? Nope. Again, you could argue that we have this for here and this for here. Should they be inside of their own function, each one, because they don't really share much in common? One goes through one array, the other one goes through a different array, and they do different things, right? They don't do the same thing. But yes, we could now write a function that puts everything inside. We could write a function around it that then, of course, we need to give the array as a parameter of the function. But in this case, I would say we don't need it. Like this is correct. But if you want to do it in a different way, just create a different file and call it part 3.1 or whatever, and go on it. I've seen that some of you in your homework, you figured out the solution, and then you had time to figure out a different way or a very different way or something like that, and the same in the same file, that's completely fine, because again, I read the code, and if I see that you're working on the things that you should work, that's exactly what I want, basically. But of course, if you're happy with the first solution, stick with it. Okay, and now, was there any very big question? I know that this playlist song is a little bit similar with the year calculation, I think. No, I don't remember quite, but I was wondering if the last one would be more important to have a look at. Which one was it? The Notes app.
Yeah, the adding a song is sort of like similar to this one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, basically, you would have to do, I think, 2 for loops. I'm not sure right now. But I want to find it. Okay, so this is a taking note app, right? First of all, let's just create a file here. Call it part 4. And in here, I will just copy paste. And call it part 4. So, okay, so this, sometimes this very long text might not help. Save a note. The first thing we will create is a function to save a note. So we need a variable called notes. So let's just do whatever he's telling us and assign an empty array. It's an empty array. Now, in these exercises, some of them, again, if they explain exactly what you have to do, it might be that there's going to be a hard thing down the line, because this one is really telling you, then do this, then do that, then do that. So we need an add note function that has 2 parameters, content and ID. So function add note. And then we need 2 parameters, content and ID, right? And actually it's telling us that it's a string and ID is a number. So content is string, ID is a number. We can actually add comments saying maybe check for type of, because if it's telling us that, we might need at some point. Value corresponding parameters, yes. Should push an object to the nodes array. Okay. So basically we have this one here. So what is actually telling us to is to push. It's an object, right? The object has 2 keys, yes. Okay, we will do it first like this, const object, and it tells us that has 2 keys that corresponds to the names of content and ID. Content and ID. Now we saw, and then we push the object inside. This was what it was asking us before. But last class, when we looked at the objects, we actually saw that if the name of the variable matches the key of the object, we can actually do this. this is exactly the same. So I will write it up here and I'll comment it out. So we have it. Same as this one. Because again, sometimes if you get a variable name and you want to assign it to a key that says full name and you don't put the key, but then you're asking for it, that might be a trouble. And some people argue that you always should do this. Always, always, always. Some people say that it's okay to do this. I don't really have a saying on this one, I think. For me, both. I mean, this one is less code, so maybe better. But yeah, both work anyway. Now we can add a note, create a function called getNote from ID. So let's just do it. When calling this function with the ID, it should return the relevant note object that corresponds of the ID. So we have an ID here, right? And we have an array of nodes, and we want to check if this ID, if there is a node with this ID, then return that whole object. So const result equals an object. Actually, no, sorry. First, because we have an array of nodes, then we know what an array means. We have to loop through it. And of course, if the nodes of the position ID, right? Because there is an ID. If this one is exactly the same as this ID, then we want to return this, and in here we will just return nothing. Now we already have something that adds a node, and now this one getNote from ID. I don't know if in here before going to the next one, I would like to see if this one works at least, and that one works. So we have these two functions and we have this array. So first of all, let's console log the array of nodes. Now if we run this, it's empty. So because we haven't added anything, right? So now if we say add node, and we need to say content, this is content and the ID and 1. Let's send as a number because they said it was a number. And now console log notes. Okay, so now, yeah, there is with content and ID 1. If we add 2 and this is another content, then we get this. And then of course we should see, does this one even work? So we can actually just console log and call the function at the same time. So if we say getNote from ID and we give 2, it gave the number 2, right? If we say 1, it gave the number 1. I don't know, if we say 0, it actually gave undefined because we are not returning anything. We can just return item with ID not found. Yeah, so we are doing this. So our functions, these ones at least, work fine. Come on. Now user can then note and see the specific note, but only remember the ID. Let's create a functionality for him. Yeah, this we did it. Return an array of notes. Again, this might be a little bit of a weird one because we have everything in one big file. So we can, of course, create a function that and this one basically only returns the notes because the notes is completely outside of it. Sure. So, I mean, this one is quite of a silly function to do. Functionality that logs out notes formatted, and do we have the? Yeah. So, yeah, function that log out notes formatted. We just copy it here. Function, and we've done this a couple of times. We have this one, right? And basically what we want is to format it in a nice way. So let's just copy whatever format they want us to have. And let's log that format exactly. Okay, this one is too much here. And now we just need to replace the places where we want. So in here we have nodes of i.content. Did I call it content? I think so. And then in here would have the nodes of ID, right? And if we just call this one down here, yeah, we have the contents there. Now, of course, because they told us that this should be a number, this should be a string, we should, when we get that type of information, we should, of course, do what we know already. And always remember that the number in JavaScript is a number, a string, the type of it. So, and in this case, I would, I don't know if they actually mention it somewhere, but I would just return number or ID as to be of type number. And then, of course, the same for the string, basically, the content, sorry. And yeah, and then of course there was this part where we could test somewhere here, right? Insert your code here. Is it? Yeah, it should be. Let's see if it works. So if we do this,
function return node should be named get nodes. It doesn't say that in the readme.
oh, okay. Oh, that's why. This one, probably. Oh. And if we get another one and another one, and now when we log out, and that was a question because that in the beginning actually I did not really understood, and I didn't even realize that they gave this whole interface. I actually thought you did it. And then they realized like, okay, they actually gave it. This is basically like if you click here, console, that's where it goes. And I mean, if you inspect, it should also go to that to the console of the browser. But basically, that's what it was asked, is to really use the console log, because then it appears on a console. And that was that could have been a little bit tricky. But this exercise, again, I think it's, in my opinion, is really, really simple, because it's but it's very small functions. And as you can see, everything we learned until now are being used by like from top to bottom.
This actually seems simpler than the other one that we just did.
Yeah, because the other one included a lot of mathematics that we need to make sure it works. This one is more about the process of, do we know a for loop? If you know a for loop, you can do 80% of it. Okay, maybe not 80, but at least half. If you know a function, because in this case it asks specifically to do a function, it also asks specifically, it has to have 2 parameters. Again, this would be an exercise that if I were you, I would do it, and then I would do it again, and then I would close your solution and try to do it. Can you do it without looking at the solution? Because you just need to concentrate a little bit, and yeah. But because this one, you put in practice everything we learned until now. Everything. There is objects, arrays, for loops, constants, variables, parameters, functions. Yeah. And of course, if, and I think we will go soon-ish, but if you look at, and this was the code given by Back to the Future, of course, it tells you to paste your code here, insert your code here, and then you don't need to worry about yet. But if you look at the code, this is exactly what's going to be on JavaScript module 2. We're going to start to interact a little bit with the visuals of things, from what I remember of the content of it. Not a lot of interactions, not going crazy with things, but so eventually you'll see things happening on a website, not on a console. But yeah, and that would be, of course, module 2. And but in here there is some code which you should not try to understand yet. But if you are very curious and you understand it, that's even more awesome. Is there any specific question about specific thing or anything?
Not now. Maybe
Not
after
now.
watching this
Yeah.
video again and again and again.
Yeah. Okay, maybe I will stop the recording for now because